Pictures. Words and pictures.
There was an old woman all skin and bones. She lived down by the old graveyard. One night she thought she'd take a walk. She walked down by the old graveyard. She saw the bones lying around. She went to the cupboard to get a broom. She opened the door and...
Boo! Hello. Do you think they were really scared or just pretending? Well, I'm glad it didn't frighten you away, because we're going to have a spooky story. Do you like stories that scare you a little bit? Well, this one is about 3 skeletons who go out on a dark, dark night looking for someone to frighten. I don't think they'll frighten you, though. Look at the title. Funnybones. You know, somehow, I don't think a story called Funnybones can be all that frightening. Do you? This is how the story begins. On a dark, dark hill, there was a dark, dark town. In the dark, dark town, there was a dark, dark street. In the dark, dark street, there was a dark, dark house. In the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark staircase. Down the dark, dark staircase, there was a dark, dark cellar. And in the dark, dark cellar, some skeletons lived. There was a big skeleton, a little skeleton, and a dog skeleton. One night, the big skeleton sat up in bed. He scratched his skull. "What shall we do tonight?" he said. "Let's take the dog for a walk," said the little skeleton, "and frighten somebody." "Good idea," the big skeleton said. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton left the dark, dark cellar, climbed the dark, dark staircase, and stepped out into the dark, dark street. They walked past the houses and the shops. They walked past the police station. They went into the park. The big skeleton scratched his skull. "What shall we do now?" he said. "Let's play on the swings," said the little skeleton, "and throw a stick for the dog, and frighten somebody." "Good idea," the big skeleton said. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton walked round the dark, dark pond, past the dark, dark tennis courts, and up to the dark, dark swings. The big skeleton and the little skeleton played on the swings. They threw a stick for the dog. Suddenly, something happened. The dog skeleton chased the stick tripped over a park bench, bumped into a tree, and ended up as a little pile of bones. "Look at that," the big skeleton said. "He's all come to pieces. What shall we do now?" "Let's put him together again," the little skeleton said. So the big skeleton and the little skeleton put the dog skeleton together again. Then they got mixed up. When they'd finished, the big skeleton said, "That dog looks a bit funny to me." "So he does," said the little skeleton. "We've got his tail on the wrong end, and his head." "Phew," said the dog skeleton. At last, the dog was properly put back together again. The big skeleton scratched his skull. "That reminds me," he said. "We forgot to frighten somebody." "Let's do it on the way home then," said the little skeleton. "Good idea," the big skeleton said. So the big skeleton, the little skeleton, and the dog skeleton left the dark, dark swings, went out into the dark, dark town, and tried to frighten somebody. The trouble was, there wasn't anybody. Everybody was asleep. Even the policemen in the police station were asleep. The big skeleton said, "What shall we do now?" The little skeleton scratched his skull. "Let's frighten each other," he said. "That's better than nothing." "Good idea," the big skeleton said. So after that, the big skeleton frightened the little skeleton. The little skeleton frightened the big skeleton. The big skeleton and the little skeleton frightened the dog skeleton. And the dog skeleton frightened them. They hid round corners and frightened each other. They climbed up lampposts and frightened each other. They jumped out of dustbins and frightened each other. All the way home. And that is how the story ends. On a dark, dark hill, there was a dark, dark town. In the dark, dark town, there was a dark, dark street. In the dark, dark street, there was a dark, dark house. In the dark, dark house, there was a dark, dark staircase. Down the dark, dark staircase, there was a dark, dark cellar. In the dark, dark cellar, some skeletons lived. They still do.
Could a skeleton really go out walking, do you think? I don't think it's very likely. There are some real skeletons in the library today. They aren't walking about, though. They're on display for you to look at. Skeletons and skulls of different creatures. We borrowed them from the museum.
So we'll have to be very careful they don't get damaged.
Yes.
We don't want any broken bones.
And if you take a closer look, you'll see just how many bones there are. Did you recognize what some of those skeletons were? There was the skeleton of a cat. A cat's skeleton. The skeleton of a chicken. A chicken's skeleton. The skeleton of a bird. A bird's skeleton.
Here's a human skeleton to do a dance for you. A skeleton. With a skirt on. A skeleton skipping. A skeleton playing. Skittles.
Skittles. Skipping. Skirt. 3 words that start with the same 2 letters as skeleton. Maybe you can think of some more. Oh, what's up, Charlie? You're looking very thoughtful.
I was just wondering, Vicky, supposing I leant against one of these skeletons and it fell over against another skeleton and that skeleton fell over against...
Oh, please be careful, Charlie.
Well, no, I was just wondering how long it would take to pick up all the bones, put them together again.
Oh, please don't even think about it, Charlie. Oh, dear. Bye-bye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.